And now to the analysis of Shields and Brooks. That is syndicated columnist Mark Shields and New York Times columnist David Brooks. Hello to both of you. So before we turn to all the whatever we want to call it, this happened in Washington this week. Mark, let's talk a minute about Iowa. We heard this voter tell Amna, this is really hard. I don't know why it's so hard. There are only 23 candidates.
No, that's right. that is, Amna captured the Iowa essence. I mean, these people take their responsibility very seriously.
They do.
It's not casual. They are gatekeepers. Between Iowa and New Hampshire, they are 1.4% of the population of the country. And unless you finish in the top 3 in Iowa and the top 2 in New Hampshire, you will not be elected president of the United States based on historical precedent. And that's why it makes sense for both Mr. Castro and Mr. O'Rourke to be spending time there.
They get one-on-one time.
Yeah, if you love politics, this is the time to go, actually, right now, because there's like crowds of 3 or 8, and there are candidates everywhere. You can drive in beautiful weather and see beautiful candidates, and then it all peaks at the state fair where they all sort of congregate. My most profound political coverage moment was covering Gary Bauer, who was running in the Republican primary, as he toured a refrigerated railway car with the Last Supper carved in butter in life size. And that was politics at its best.
Yeah.
That was the state fair.
That was at the state fair.
Which is coming up in August. We've already got it on our calendar here at the NewsHour.
Raise the cholesterol level of the entire state and press corps.
All right, so now tear ourselves away from Iowa, Mark, to talk about what's going on in Washington this week, this escalating battle between the Congress and the White House. Just today, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in the House, Richard Neal, is subpoenaing the Secretary of the Treasury, the head of the IRS, to go after the president's tax return. This on top of subpoenas for the president's son, subpoenas for the attorney general. What do we make of all this?
Well, I mean, I think it's approaching almost situational overload in terms of, I mean, we're talking about subpoenas from committees, including the House Intelligence Committee, the House Banking Committee, the Judiciary Committee, across the board. And now we have the Intelligence Committee in the Senate, as you mentioned, led by Republicans that have subpoenaed the president's son. I just think, Judy, that in a strange way, this plays to Donald Trump's strength. I mean, Donald Trump lives in chaos. I think it's sort of almost an emotional and technological and intellectual overload, given the fact that we're on the cusp of war in Iran, in Venezuela, in a showdown with the Chinese. I mean, it's just, but this is what he thrives on, and I think there's almost a "I dare you to impeach me" attitude that's prevailing.
Overload, you mean for the American people?
For the American people, and for the system wasn't intended for this. I mean, this isn't the way it's constructed, that we can deal with crisis upon crisis upon crisis.
David, the Democrats say they're very serious about all this. They want this information. They want this testimony. I mean, are they pursuing the right strategy for them?
No, well, neither side is. You know, it's a complete breakdown of the checks and balances system. The president has to say, Congress, I need you. I need you to oversee what I'm doing. I need you to correct for my imbalances. And so I'm going to cooperate with you. And that's just the normal way we do business. And the Trump administration is not doing that. So that's the first crisis. The second is, if you're going to do oversight, you got to oversee. You got to try to say, I'm at least going to try to be a productive force here. But what we're seeing on the side of the Democrats is an escalation of the passion, and it's just become an attack machine. And so there's a lot of talk now about jailing people. There's a lot of talk about just holding multiple people in contempt. This fight over the redaction is the wrong fight to have.
Of the Mueller report. Of
the Mueller report. The administration has offered to show of the volume 2, which is about obstruction, the vast majority, 99.5%, to at least the elite Democrats. And that wasn't good enough, and so there was a little of a negotiation which broke down. But to me, that issuing orders of contempt, which may go forward, just freezes everything. It just pushes everything into the courts, and we sit there and do nothing for a couple of years. And so there's a way to do this, and there's a way not to do this. So there's a lot of error on the Trump administration, but nonetheless, I think the Democrats across the board and across many committees are sort of walking slowly up toward impeachment. and we could end up in impeachment, and I do think that's what Donald Trump
But
wants.
Mark, like we had on the program last night Jerry Nadler, who's the chairman of the House Judiciary
Yes.
Committee, who essentially said, if we don't carry out our responsibility, we're not fulfilling what the Constitution, what the founders wanted and expected Congress to do, which is have oversight over the executive.
That is it's a legitimate argument. Make no mistake about it. I mean that if you lay down a precedent literally that this president gets away with what he's getting away with, and the Congress does nothing, then that certainly lays the precedent for the next president. I think just to add to the point David made, Donald Trump, according to USA Today, which established a database, has been a plaintiff or a defendant in 4,095 lawsuits. Now think about that. I mean, that's an awful lot.
Over his career.
Over his career. I mean, about employment, about contracts, about subcontractors, you name it. He's been, you talk about litigious. He enjoys this. I mean, he thrives on this. This is modus operandi, and I really think they're playing to his strength, quite honestly. And he's sitting there, quite honestly, Judy, with 91% approval among Republicans. And that just, I think, intimidates his own party.
But David, are the two of you saying Democrats just drop this? I mean, what should they approach?
No, they should be in the business of trying to inform the American voter. And so getting Mueller to testify, the fact that Mueller may not testify is outrageous. Mueller should testify. And so they should be in that business. But basically what they're doing is walking up toward the line of impeachment, and you can see the passions rising as they get further and further down that line. And there's a difference between going toward the prosecutorial impeachment and having hearings to educate the American voter. And when you get down one path, you're really trying to appease the part of the party that wants impeachment. And the problem when you try to appease that part, you end up emboldening, and you just turn it into an attack game. And what Donald Trump wants, who does Donald Trump want to be his foil, his opposite member? Does he want it to be the presidential candidates, most of whom are kind of attractive, who he's actually running against? Or would he rather run against Congress? Of course he'd rather run against Congress. Any president would.
But Mark, I mean, I come back to what the Democrats are saying is we want this information. The administration is saying we're not going to give it to you. So does it ever get resolved?
No, there's no question that they're playing absolutely hardball, and is the administration, and they're not being respectful of the law in the least. I think, Judy, what you have to make the difference is the Russians were involved in this election in 2016. Make no mistake about it. Our intelligence agencies have all concluded that unanimously. They were around in 2018. They got all the way into a county in Florida, into its official site. So that is a legitimate area. What are we going to have American elections for Americans and not interference? And nobody can argue with that, save Donald Trump. I mean, his own administration is mindful of that.
And you're saying that's what they should be talking about.
I think that's where they ought to be going.
Let's turn.
There's even a weird moment where a senator started acting like a senator, Richard Burr, Republican from North Carolina, who wanted to bring Don Jr. to investigate that exact question. The rest of the Republican Party went crazy because he was acting like an actual senator who wants to get at the bottom of a very serious issue. And
Judy, point out that his own colleague, Tom Tillis in North Carolina, who had written a very straightforward op-ed page piece in the Washington Post opposing Donald Trump's declaration of a national emergency on building the wall, and then caved like a $4 suitcase when Donald Trump objected, went after his own colleague, Richard Burr, and criticized him for leading a bipartisan investigation.
I'm thinking of a $4 suitcase.
Okay.
David, I want to turn, though, to the all the news today about China. The president basically saying we're throwing these tariffs down, and this is the way it's going to be. The president's thrown the gauntlet down, knowing that U.S. economic interests, farmers, auto manufacturers, are going to suffer.
Right, and I think normally the default for a lot of people, certainly in the center-right, would be this is ridiculous. Trade wars are always unwinnable. But I'm struck by the broad consensus among many people who normally are very pro-free traders that something has to be done about China right now. that they are moving up the supply chain and up to our industries, AI and the high-tech industries, and they're not doing it fairly. They're doing it by stealing. And so the systemic threat that China presents now makes some hard negotiation and even some tariffs acceptable. And so China has brought this on themselves and has converted a lot of people who are radically pro-free trade into thinking we've got to do something about China.
Is it something, though, Mark, that the president should be thinking about? There are voters out there who are concerned with farmers' interests and other U.S. economic interests that are going to be hurt by this.
Sure there are, Judy, but I mean, and this is a time, if ever there was one, when you want a coalition of nations. And we find ourselves isolated increasingly under this administration and this president's approach. I mean, this is a time for a coordinated, collective, strong approach to and enforcement with China. And I agree with David that China has to be confronted. I mean, whether this is Donald Trump has one great asset going into 2020, and that is a booming American economy. I mean, it is unparalleled. 50 years, the lowest unemployment, rising wages.
But are you saying this risks?
I think it definitely puts it at risk. I really do.
You could have a very bad outcome, which would actually have an actual trade war. You could, it seems unlikely to me, have a good outcome where China actually does move. China seems under no pressure to actually do that. And then there's a lot of different scenarios in between. But the possibility of a real trade war is certainly a live possibility. I just wish we could have more confidence in our side of the table.
Only 40 seconds left. Iran, to both of you very quickly, is the president wise at this point to be pushing Iran? We've got now a carrier moving into the region. We've got B-52s. What are we looking at here?
To me, this is a Potemkin foreign policy. It has a facade of toughness, but there's no actual interagency process behind it. There's no actual delivery mechanism. So to me, it looks a little more like bluster.
2 battle carrier groups, Judy, one in the Med and one in the Gulf. I mean, this is serious stuff. We're talking about a president who got elected by withdrawing from American entanglements, and this is serious stuff. And I just commend both Senator Tim Kaine, the Democrat from Virginia, and Todd Young, the Republican from Indiana, who are trying to get the Congress to confront the fact that they have never repealed the authorization of United military force, which is, since World War II, 153,000 Americans have died in uniform without any declaration of war.
Mark Shields, David Brooks, thank you.